I'm Andrea, a passionate DEI advocate and consultant on a mission. Join me in each episode as we celebrate diversity, ignite conversations, and craft workplaces and educational institutions where everyone thrives. This podcast is my commitment to making a meaningful impact on the world of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So are you ready? Let's get Diversifused. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Get Diversifused podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Horton-Mericli, founder of Diversifused DEI Consulting and a passionate DEI advocate and ally. In today's episode, we will discuss unlocking innovation, embracing divergence in business leadership with our guest speaker, Kristopher Schmidt. Kristopher is committed to fusing divergent experiences and worldviews, creating a space where everyone feels safe, belongs, and contributes. He beat all the odds leading every function of a financial technology company, including HR, legal, IT, compliance, and facilities as the CAO, CHRO, and the CLO. As the insider of the C-suite, he influenced and aligned these power structures to embrace divergence and create unprecedented outcomes. He uses holistic system thinking, tracking inputs, outputs, stakeholder perspectives, and interests to get things done in a whole new way. Figuring out how to solve impossible problems lights him up. He continues to learn every day from his two neurodivergent teens and highly active miniature schnauzers, and remains an active member of the LGBTQIA+ community. So welcome, Kristopher, to the Get Diversifused podcast. Thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, your experiences, and how you got to found your company?
Sure. Thanks. I don't want to drop anchor too much, but I think the backstory is a little bit interesting. So I grew up in a small town in Southern Illinois, pretty conservative culturally, and felt like I didn't fit in from almost the get-go. I was that kid who, my mom said after I came out, well, I knew you were gay when you were two. I was like, okay, thanks for sharing. Why was it so hard? But, from there I went to college where I, obviously it was exposed to different cultures. This was now Chicago, Illinois. And I had a lot of really great experiences there. Northwestern University was my undergrad. And from that, perspective, I mean, it had a lot of cultural differences. They Northwestern really believe in diversity from not just race, which of course is part of it, but like economic background, social background. So I went to school with people who came from the Appalachians who hadn't really worn shoes until they got to college, as well as people who were, of color and other kind of ethnic backgrounds. So it was great as a place to sort of break into what diversity could look like. From there, I went to law school at WashU in St. Louis, and to say that it was more conservative than Chicago and Northwestern would have been an understatement. So while I was president of the Gay and Lesbian Organization at Northwestern, and often would get asked for quotes, I'm like, I can't really represent the gay community. Yes, I'm gay, but I don't represent every gay and lesbian person on the planet. So asking me for a
You
quote,
don't? What do you mean?
well, it's a convenient idea that that we're monolithic, right? And that we all think and all act the same and all of our interests are the same, but it's not true.
Who knew?
So I never made a good quote. But then I got to WashU, and we established a first ever, LGBTQ organization for law students. And it was That's like, awesome. Do we need one of those? And I was like, well, I will tell you that there are a number of LGBTQ people who are your students that probably represent at least as many folks as the, people of color. So yeah, I think that's a good idea. And so those are some early experiences. And then I left law school, and my first job out of law school was as an advocate for children who were entitled to educational benefits but weren't receiving them, and individuals who were incarcerated in mental health institutions against their will because they represented, at least according to the state, a danger to themselves or others. And so they had a right to a hearing to figure that out. So those are some of my sort of earliest experiences. And then I was in the public defender's office for a year, and I had a coach at the time. She said, you don't like working for the state. I'm like, no, I don't understand it, but I like the work. So she's like, well, when are you going to work for yourself? And I was like, I don't know. And she's like, well, if you don't set a deadline, then it'll never happen. I'm like, okay, well, how about 6 months? I just pulled that out of my ear. And I was like, okay, so here I go. And, 6 months later, I started my own practice.
That's awesome.
And that lasted for 10 years. I was commercial attorney. So I've always had an interest and background in sort of business. Economics was my major. And then my minor was sociology. So I had, kind of these intersectional lives, all along. And my practice kind of reflected that. But hold on just a second. I should have turned that off, because that is my neurodivergent, thing, like take a Pomodoro break, because you get really, really focused. And if I'm not being reminded, and I use Alexa to do that. Anyway, so you found one of my tools in the background, secrets. So I, left the practice and went into become a Microsoft certified system engineer in 1999, right before the Y2K was happening. And part of that was that I had a couple of experiences while I was very successful in defending clients. I found that I was becoming more and more isolated from my peer group because I was successful as a criminal defense lawyer. And that didn't sort of suit my life purposes. So I sold the practice, and I was like, well, I'm going to do something else. And the benefit of that, I suppose, was I didn't have a lot of student debt, and I didn't have, kids, and I wasn't married. So I could kind of do whatever I want. And I think that looks interesting, so I'll do it. And that's been a bit about how my life has gone. But so that was great. I worked at St. Louis University School of Law for a gig there, setting up their IT department that was integrated with the university. So that was kind of my first thing of figuring out how to bring stakeholders together in a setting where interests were divergent, right? Like the librarians had it forever and they didn't really want to give it up. And the new CIO was like, everybody's going to report to me, or all the IT stuff is going to report to me. So that was a project. And then from there I left, and a friend of mine, I went to California, and I told my boss at the time, he's like, I'm going to leave. And he's like, nobody ever leaves education. It's like a lifetime thing. I was like, again, I do not understand the non-economic model of education, like sitting close to the dean, having a bigger office. None of that stuff mattered to me. So I was like, yeah, I'll be out of here. And I went to California, a little startup company. I had exposure to one of the guys who built Siri. So
that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, it was really, really, really smart people. And while I was out there, exposed to Landmark Education, which is a very sort of narrative story-based thing. You might know The Matrix. It came out of two graduates from that program, the Wachowski sisters. At the time they wrote it, they were the Wachowski brothers, but they were fascinating. And so that was really, I think, sort of instrumental in helping me, open up my mind to the fact that we're often limited by the beliefs we have, right? So if you believe this to be true, it makes it true. And that fit in really, really nicely. I then came back from California and went into a degree program to get my master's in counseling. And where I landed, not surprisingly, given that story that I just told you, was narrative therapy. So it's reframing the conversation of the conflict in such a way that you can join with the person who's having the challenge and help change the narrative or the outcome, right?
That's
And
cool.
my favorite population were children, and one of them they talked about was, you know, kids who would have nighttime accidents.
Okay.
And a lot of parents can get really upset, you know,
They
because
can, yeah.
there's a lot of work that goes into cleaning up, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, you're a big person now, or you know, fill in the blank.
Yeah. You get
And so
stigmatized.
there's a lot of
Yeah.
shame.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, we worked with something called Sneaky Pea and Sneaky Poo, right?
That's
So these
cute.
were these characters who would come and like hijack you. So if you're a parent, you were working with the kid to try to figure out what to do in order to overcome these things and minimize the trauma that's associated with, well, I didn't want to bed, right? And again, those experiences are just really foundational to sort of approaching diversity or even inclusion, right? Because a lot of times these things are not intentionally designed, they just simply show up, and our reaction is the thing that shapes the way that we respond. So that's kind of interesting. And then I had this friend of mine after I graduated from my master's in counseling. I was like, you should really, you know, apply for this job. I was like, whatever. But I did. And, you know, one of the things I did when I interviewed people was I just saw all these things that were broken. Like I just interviewed, and the interview was like, I believe interviews are about, you know, like it's a two-way street, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
I've got my skills, you got the opportunity. Am I a good match?
Mm-hmm.
I'll be a good match for somebody. I might not be a good match for you. So I don't ever go into a situation in which I'm feeling desperate. I just more like, you know, if you were going to get married, you wouldn't be like, pick me, pick me, pick me. Or if you do, you're likely not to have the best marriage only by accident.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, I told the guy that I was interviewing with who was hiring, I said, if you want things to stay the same and you just want me to make it a better version of what it is today, don't hire me. Just don't. Because I can't. I cannot come into the situation and let it just be the way it is, because it's seriously not right. Just in interviewing people, I could just hear all of it, right? So it's my assessment phase that if you look at Purpocity Consulting, that's a part of what I talk about. Like the very first step is to assess the situation, and you have to do that honestly, right? Like I'm going to just look at it. So anyway, he ended up hiring me, which led to 20 years in fintech, because that was my first opportunity. It started in 2005 and I left in 2024.
Wow. So you just left.
Yeah. I left mid-year 23. Yeah. Okay. So call it 18 years in fintech. And, you know, I was in fintech 18 years. In 18 years, I had 9 different CEOs. A lot of change.
Wow.
And the thing is that I was consistent. I never ended up, you know, losing a job. I ended up saying, no, maybe I'm not a good fit and we should, you know, part friends. And I think that, you know, again, is just this honest assessment of where we are. So with that having been said, that's, you know, kind of over the years in these fintech companies, they kind of start to grow, and so they're small and you get more and more responsibility. Well, could you do that? Yes. Could you do that? Yes. Could you do that? Yes. You know, if you keep saying yes, you could, you know, pretty much start to do whatever you want. So that ended, you know, in 2023. But that's a little bit about my background. And I mean, we can go further or talk more specifically about how those experiences got me to a place of applying the, you know, sort of divergent thinking in business. But it really sort of, for me, applies everywhere. You know, with my neurodivergent kids, you know, it's the same stuff. You know, my son comes home, he's autistic and has ADHD, so we sometimes call it AUDHD.
I like that, actually.
Yeah, I do too. But he's got fine motor graphic skill challenges, really frustrating. And we had this school year, he just refused to do something. And my thing is, you can't refuse. It's just, you cannot. We have to figure out why. And then we have to go. So back to my narrative there,
assessing
what's going on, and I was working with him, and he's like, I can't draw, a shape because his hand just doesn't have the fine motor skills. I was like, fair enough. So we worked with his teacher, and I said, if I get him a stencil to give him an outline so he can start and feel like he's got a high enough quality outline, will that work? And because he has a 501 or 504. Yeah. No, he actually has an IEP. My daughter has a 504.
Oh, okay.
So he has an IEP. And I pretty much get to negotiate with them over what that looks like. She's like, oh, yeah, that's fine.
That's good. Actually, not many parents do. So I'm glad that you really do get involved. A lot of parents sit in, because I used to be a special ed teacher. A lot of parents sit in and just listen to what the suggestions are and accept it for what it is. And you want the parents do need to be involved. They know their kids the best.
Yeah. So anyway, we got that worked out. But similar, my son had again, with autism, one of the challenges we have is social interactions. And so there's another little kiddo who's also autistic in his special ed class, and they just butt heads. And to the point where, we were being called all the time, and people were being suspended. So it was bad.
Okay.
And the administration said, well, do you need us to separate them, like in classrooms? And I said, well, the challenge that my son has and this other little guy has is getting along, right? I mean, that's part of it. And if we separate them and they don't have to figure out how to get along, we've missed an opportunity to learn, right? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay.
Good point.
If you can't keep them safe or figure out how to get them to get along, then I'm fully supportive of you putting him in a different classroom. But because this is one of the things he needs to work on, and it's one of the things that you're supposed to deliver as part of the educational experience, I'm going to leave it up to you to let me know whether we need to put them in different classrooms because you're not capable.
Well said.
So that was, and they ended up staying in the same classroom. That doesn't mean he wasn't frustrated by the guy, because he was. It's like, okay, today's a B day. I've got to do, I'm like, okay. Yeah, got through today. Good. Because you're going to have a boss, or you're going to have a coworker, or you're going to have somebody who just really irritates you, and you're just not allowed to smack people because they make you mad. You want to, but you got to get me started on that. But of course, but that's one of the social skills that we need to develop in order to be successful. And again, I just assume that he can figure it out, and my job is to try to help as well as the people who are around him. But again, that's sort of infused in my, as I said, divergence, diversity approach. So anyway, there's a little bit about me.
So, is it possible for you to explain how divergence has played a role in driving innovation and growth in your experience as a business leader?
Well, and again, you could use a couple of these examples, right? So let's just pick the one that we just had for my son, although it's not in business, unless you think of school as a business. But
it is a business, really. It's an organization.
I think it is, but again, for those who might want to disagree, I'm just going to say, okay. My approach was, what's the business about for this special ed class for these two autistic kids? What is it? It's to teach them how to get along with people, in addition to the educational pieces of math and language arts and all the other stuff, right? And they're like, yeah. So I'm going to let you not do your job by giving you permission to remove him from a classroom so that you don't have to do it. Is that what you're telling me? It's like, no. I was like, okay, well, I'm just, again, so I take on this idea of provocateur in chief. So I ask the logical question that comes out of the opportunity, And then I'm like, is that what you're saying? And they're like, now that you put it that way, no. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So then what are we going to do? And they're like, well, I don't know. And I'm like, I'm happy to share more about my son. I have no idea about this other little kiddo, and I don't know about the dynamic of the classroom.
Yeah.
But I know that all of you are trained and equipped to do this. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to rely on you to come up with a solution that educates my son and this other little guy in order to be able to be better members of society, the culture. And they're like, okay. And they went away and they came up with, other solutions. And so that's a very common way for me to approach these things. So again, going back to Landmark, there's this idea that's called the already always way of thinking. So we all come in to an experience and we know how it's supposed to go. We know how it's supposed to go because we've seen it before, we've done it before, we've been told about it before. And when things break down in the already always ways of thinking, it means something's wrong. Mm. And instead of something being wrong, like I've got to fix something or I've got to change something to make it so that we get the same outcome as we always get.
Yeah.
But there's no innovation in that. There's no change. So you have to take head on the already always ways of thinking to say, really? And, one of the examples that I had in my last employer was, and again, it was a business opportunity. We needed to grow the business by 30% in terms of just sales volume. We weren't going to get any more salespeople, and we weren't going to get any more staff to help build contracts. And so you looked at that, and if you just looked at the model, you'd say, well, we're just going to have to make people work harder, work more hours. 30% more hours? They're already working 45-hour weeks. How many hours are you expecting them to work exactly?
Yeah. Where's the work-life balance?
Oh, I don't even talk about work-life balance. Just set aside. Say you don't care about people, whatever. They're just machines.
Yeah. If
it was just a computer, then you'd be talking about the incremental power, the incremental CPU, whatever. I mean, again, I don't really care, but a 30% increase in a period of 12 months with no more resources is something has to change. Yeah. So you can't do it the way you did it before and get the outcome that you just said you want. And people are like, what? And I'm like, well, it's the logical outcome of the conversation. There is no other. Now we have to then go back and break something. And when we break it, what are we going to break? Well, the way we contract with folks at that organization at the time was old fashioned. We had a master services agreement. We sent it out. We got it to the lawyer. The lawyer on the other side read it. They took whatever length of time they read. The business person who gave them the contract wasn't in charge of their time. So they got to it whenever they damn well pleased. Yep. And, the sales cycle just got really, really long. And then you fought about stuff. And I was like, how about we completely change that? Yeah. How about instead we do terms of service? How about there isn't any contract to negotiate, but instead what we're going to do is we're going to offer up an order form. Now, that's not a novel idea, really. I mean, Apple does it. All sorts of people do it. It's not new, but it was new to that organization. And there was like gnashing of teeth and tears and, all this stuff.
Tears.
Yeah. Well, people get pretty invested in like the way that they do stuff. Like,
yeah, they do.
And the salespeople were like, I've spent years getting to know our contract, and it's a really important part of our sales cycle. And like, okay, but that's all just a waste. It's sort of like horses and buggies. I really like riding a horse. I really like putting the bridle on. It's like, you go ahead and do that. I'm going to get in the car and I'll meet you on the other side when you're done.
See you in 3 hours.
whatever. So, I mean, breakthroughs come from people who are willing to just say, well, this isn't going to work. And then you go, well, I don't know how. Well, there are some times where they're truly never been done before kinds of things, like the first time you go to the moon. Like, how are you going to get there? I don't know. We're going to do it. How do you fly? I don't know. Birds do it. So our breakthroughs have always come from people who've been divergent. And I don't call that diversity. It's divergent. Now, why is that important? Well, divergent, everybody possesses, really, or can.
Yeah, that's true.
So if you take a person like myself, white guy, educated, and you throw me into Nairobi, I'm going to be other.
Mm-hmm.
And
going to be the minority.
I'm going to be in the minority. And I'm not going to have access to the power structures. I'm not going to get listened to, blah, 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 blah. Now you can argue about, well, because you're white and Nairobi values white people, then you would be, you would be. So we can go around and around and around about all that. But the idea is really divergence comes from the context, right, of the matter, not the qualities of the person. Yeah. So if I'm going to be in a religious community like a Mennonite, right, like we have a way of doing things, and it looks like this, and we do it this way because it supports our community and what we value. And there's perfectly valid reasons for all that. But if you want to try to produce more, and you got to do some things that go against the values, you just nope, not going to do it. So it's a value conversation, and you just have to sort of say, do we care? And if we care, what are we going to do about it? So for me in business, it's about trying to figure out, like, what are we caring about? What's important?
What's our why?
What's our why? And how are we going to get there? So divergence, though, comes out of being different. And different is different than the context. So again, it's, one of the greatest stories I heard was there's a DEI officer at Target. I loved her. She was fantastic. I sat and listened to her. Target, right. Target. Exactly. No, she was a keynote speaker. And she just did such a lovely job of describing, and she was, diversity, but really what she was capturing was divergence. And she had been a buyer at Target before, long before she was the DEI officer. And what she noticed was in her buying journey for Target, she was buying cosmetics and other things for people who were light skinned. And she couldn't go to Target and buy anything that she could buy for herself. And so she said to her boss, I don't know why all we're doing is buying cosmetics for white folk.
Yeah.
I can't shop here. And it was like light bulb moment, right? And they went, oh, so there's a market opportunity we're missing because we're not serving a population that's interested in, like, they go to Target for all this toilet paper,
office supplies, furniture,
whatever. And while I'm there, I'm going to pick up some cosmetics, except, you can't, because nothing works, nothing fits. And so Target then took her idea on board, and that led to ultimately her career as the chief DEI officer. That's and what awesome. She said to the audience, and I was in the audience at the time, was, you've made it in diversity, equity, and inclusion when the business leaders are asking you for people with different perspectives to help them perform better. As long as we're doing it as a tick box exercise, it's always going to be perceived as being shoved down someone's throat.
Yep.
Always. And somebody's going to be like, well, why did they get that and I didn't? How come they got special treatment and I didn't? And, I have always taken that perspective. So she did a really nice job, I think, of capturing it for me to repeat, right? So I don't want to take credit for it, but it was what I was in fact doing in my business life before I met her and heard her speak was I never really sort of said, the reason you should listen to me is because I'm queer. The reason you should listen to me is because I'm HIV positive. The reason you should listen to me is I have neurodivergent children. Mm-hmm. But what I will say is those experiences all led me to have different perspectives to the problems that were being presented. And I would then challenge the status quo. So the already always ways of thinking. Mm-hmm. And I would say, do we need to do it that way? And people will be like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, what do you mean? What do I mean? Do we have to do it this way? Yeah. And again, those personal experiences, from marriage equality. So very, very early on, my sister was like, well, why don't you get married? I'm like, because I can't. Yeah. And she's like, what do you mean you can't? I'm like, I can't.
She knew you were.
Oh yeah, she knew I was gay, but and I'd been with my partner, but why can't you get married? I'm like, the state won't let me.
Yeah, you have to move.
I can't get a marriage certificate or a marriage license because it says it's got to be one man and one woman. I can't. When she was like, well, that's stupid. And I'm like, because somebody who's gay, of course it's stupid, but it's the law. Yeah. So we need to change the law. And it did. Right. And similarly, I'm going to adopt children because it's been something I've wanted. Like when I was younger, I was like, 8 kids, choosing. Anyway.
Now 8 isn't enough.
No, 8's enough. 8's actually too much. I don't think I can help, especially not as a single parent and still work. But that experience of trying to adopt children. So I'm HIV positive and I'm doing open adoption. And the adoption agencies work with everybody. We're great. And they had other gay and lesbian clients. But I show up and I'm gay and HIV positive. It's like, oh. I was like, oh, what? Well, we've never worked with anybody who's HIV positive before. I'm like, okay. You ever worked with anybody with cancer? Oh, yeah. Anybody with diabetes? Yep. I'm like, there you go. Just like that. So I take my medication. I'm perfectly fine. I'm going to have a normal lifespan. So whatever thing that you just made up about whatever HIV is, and I'm going to die tomorrow, or I should have been dead yesterday. Let's just get rid of that, shall we?
30 years ago thinking.
Yeah. So we're just stuck in the past. It's fine. Yeah. I'm not. So can we talk about adopting? And they're like, okay, but you're going to have to tell the birth mom that you're positive. It's like, sure. But it's not going to be the first thing I'm going to tell them. My name is the first thing I'm going to tell them. And then we're going to see if we like each other and if there's a connection and if they want a place. And then if all that happens, then I'm going to say, oh, and by the way, if it matters to you, I have this health condition and I'll have the conversation in which I'll disclose my health condition. And I did. And, I was successful in adopting. But again, it was breaking down those assumptions about what couldn't happen. Right. So
also those, what people identify you as when they hear something. That's breaking those stereotypes.
Yeah. I had a friend of mine say that I'm the Trojan horse. Right. So why am I the Trojan horse? Because I'm white. Because I'm a dude. I was running the DEI council at one of our organizations and I was the sponsor, and this person on our council was Native. And she said out loud in a meeting where a lot of people were like, why do you get to represent this? You're a white dude.
Again, that's stereotyping.
Which again, completely fine. And I just, and you could hear the oxygen going out of the room. People are like, here we have a C-suite person who's going to sponsor us. How dare you say anything? Don't risk him being mad, And I was like, no, it's fine. Let's talk about it. Yeah. Did I do anything to get born white? Nope. How about I did something to be born male? Nope. Just happened. Let's see. I was born into an intelligence that let me go to college. Nope. Didn't do anything there either.
Yeah.
But I said what I did experience, which I think gives me some basis upon which to identify with other people, is from the time I was 2, I was a little queer kid. And I got made fun of all the time. And I was the big sissy. And I got beat up. And I didn't have any friends to speak of because I was queer.
Different. Yeah.
Yeah, different. So I said, I think from that experience, I can probably relate to what you're trying to describe or how you're experiencing things.
Yeah.
And the beauty is that I do show up, again, as this friend of mine said, the Trojan horse. Because you're like, oh, you're a white dude who's educated. Yep. And I'm here to mess with you.
I have a message.
Yeah, I do. And I actually owned it. So while I had chief administrative officer, my informal title was provocateur in chief. So I'm like,
I like it.
Was
it on your business?
I'm gonna mess with you because we all walk around with this always way of thinking about stuff, and it limits what we can do. And again, having a life that was lived, trying to figure out my place, like you can't be that gay, you'll never be successful. You can't be that out, you'll never be that successful. It's like, well, just watch me. I'm going to try. Just stop telling me I can't. And you and I were talking before we started this, it's sort of like the young woman who recently did that Downs syndrome video where, it's like, don't assume I can and I might. Right? So don't assume that because I'm gay, I won't be successful, or don't assume because I'm gay, I'm going to be a hairdresser or a florist or, a drug addict. That was the one in my family. Like, oh, if you're gay, then you're a drug addict.
Wow.
I was like, okay. Because that's all they knew, were people who were unsuccessful or people
also,
who
what Hollywood shows and it's historically shown in movies and stuff. So
it's right. It's just right. So those lived experiences, I think, did a lot to inform my approach to problems in business. And one of the other things that I've done has been figured out how to build programs where divergent folks can thrive. And what I mean by that is, one of the things that I find happens in business meetings or structures is, and we saw this in COVID a lot. Now we're all on Zoom or we're all on Teams or pick your platform. But it's like, I need to see you. If I can't see you, you're not working. I'm like,
your status needs to show online green.
I'm like, do we care about outcomes or do we care about screen time, keystrokes? There are some things I get that it matters, like keystrokes matter. Being at the front desk to greet people, being at the cashier's register in order to check people out. Those things you've got to be in person. But really, if I've got my son who's, neurodivergent, he hates being on camera, hates it, just can't stand it. So he will participate, but off camera.
And that's fine if that's what he's comfortable with.
Yeah. It not only fine, he can actually participate. I think the other thing was, I wrote in a recent post on LinkedIn, it was like, and so off camera is fine. The second piece is use artificial intelligence to take notes. Because a lot of people, again, I'm ADHD, right? So I'm like, I got my little note card and I'm writing stuff down. But AI's here. Like, why are we making this so hard? So let the AI take notes. Exactly, take notes, and then you can fully participate in just having the conversation with people. And then I think the other one that I use, and I do this all the time, even when I go in and consulting, and I do it. It's like one of the very first things I do is like, how do you like to be communicated with?
I like that. Yeah.
Like, what is it? Is it, some people are auditory, some people are visual, some people are both, Some people are kinesthetic, like I need to do the thing. And so I just give people like the permission to tell me like what's the best way. And when I run meetings where I'm trying to create new groups, so I just had a situation where I was asked to stand up a new team for an organization that was being spun out. And one of the exercises we used was a matrix of what are my preferred working hours?
Nice.
What's the preferred method to reach me? If it's an emergency, what can you do to reach me? And just document it. Now everybody has this asset that they can update, and new people come into the team and everybody just puts it in. So you get somebody new and you're like, I don't know how do they best, get information? Now, sometimes you've got a boss who will say, I need it this way. Okay, well, it's not my preferred way.
Yeah.
Can I partner up with somebody else to have them do that part and I can do the other part? So if anybody's ever done work in a school project, it's like three of
you.
Oh
my God.
all get together. Well, you say it like that because it's horrible.
It is.
If you do it the right way, it can be amazing. And again, Gallup Strength Finders, I'm a big fan of.
Oh, I love those.
Yeah. And so I want to know the strengths of the team members on my team. And here's the thing that I didn't appreciate until after I did that was we all assume that our strengths are the same things everybody else has.
Yeah. And everybody learns the same way. Everybody thinks the same way, plans the same way. Yeah.
Exactly. And when you come to the recognition that that's not true, all sorts of things open up. Now I can start to build teams in which somebody needs to be in front of the customers. Somebody needs to do the presentation. And I tell people, do not make me the spreadsheet jockey. Bad idea. Waste of money on your part. Waste of time on my part. I'm incredibly frustrated. I can talk to people about this stuff and tell them what I want and give them feedback on what it should look like. Do not ask me to do the spreadsheet. And I've had people like, you suck. I'm like, yeah, of course I suck. I told you I suck. Don't make me do stuff I'm bad at. I'll do it, but don't expect me to be a rock star because I'm just not. Yeah. And I think that that's the pieces where I look at these conversations and where I'm really focused with organizations that I love to work with are you've got a C-suite who says we really need to go knock down some major barriers, right? Or break into new markets. And there's a concept called red ocean, blue ocean. Red oceans are where the sharks are all feeding on the chum and there's blood in the water and we're all just trying to get the limited amount of food that's available. And a blue ocean is like there's nobody out there. It's clear sailing. You're the only shark. And those are where big profits are made and big breakthroughs are made is in blue ocean opportunities. So I'm looking for clients that get that we need to take on these new opportunities. And I was just reading a study recently where highly effective teams that can do this work can do projects that take ineffective teams 1/3 less time. 1/3. So I don't have to be first. I just have to be better. I don't have to be smarter. I can steal your ideas and execute them faster and still win. So it's just this incredibly compelling set of circumstances to get leaders to wake up to say, again, I love DEI. Don't get me wrong. I represent all that. But it's the divergent ways of thinking that are going to get you out of the already always ways of thinking, going all the way back to my, we got to grow 30%, no more staff, no more salespeople, no more legal team, and that's it. Goodbye. How do you do that? So somebody has to come up with a different idea. You have to change hearts and minds. You have to, you have to change stuff. And divergent people, which often are from diverse backgrounds, so that's where the intersectionality occurs, can show up and be present. Now, how do you find them? So I've got some other strategies for that, right? The folks who often have the really greatest ideas are not necessarily the ones who are at the head of the table.
Oh, yeah, definitely. They're the ones, I mean,
so
doing the
how
work.
do you get how do you get the ideas out?
Mm-hmm.
So what I do in my meetings is we build a structure. There's an agenda, and people have roles, and they shift. So while I was the provocateur in chief, right, I tried to get my teams when I ran meetings. So which one of you in this meeting is going to be the one who pokes the holes in the arguments that we're making? And we just moved it around the table. So nobody ever got to be just that one thing, right? I wanted people to sort of stretch themselves. How can we make this work?
I like that.
How come this won't work? And so we set up processes that were simple, easy for people to use in order to be able to uncover, unlock, find opportunities. And the beauty was that when we built it that way, when we hired new talent from outside, so that's Divergent, even if they kind of look like us, they didn't know the rules. I didn't want them to. Like, I hired you because we need different ways of thinking.
Out of the box thinking, yeah.
And so many organizations are built to kill anything that's different. Now, there's a really good, 200,000-year-old brain reason. And that 200,000-year-old brain reason is like, if I didn't know who you were and you weren't part of my tribe, you were a threat. Yeah. And so this stuff is really, really, really scary at a very nonverbal level, right? We hate change. We hate people who are different than us. We hate them. Hate them.
Yeah, they make us uncomfortable.
Really? And we're politer now than we were 200,000 years ago. But 200,000 years ago, we'd go after you with rocks, chase you off. Yeah. Because that was what it took to keep us safe. It's just not very good for us today. Kind of like processed food, right? Like, it was really we're a
globalized society now, and
it was really, I mean, it was really hard for us to find food, and now you've got like sugar everywhere, and like, why are we obese? I can tell you why, but
well, the junk food's cheaper than the healthy food.
Well, there's that too. I mean, there's a whole industry that's built into it, but what that industry has figured out is how to hijack that system. And what I'm proposing is a similar kind of thing. I want to hijack the older parts of our brain that don't want change, that don't like strangers. And I want everybody to be outside of their comfort zone at some point by switching these roles within the organization. And then when new people come in, they have a place to fit. And so at one of those meetings, this brand new person is the contrarian or the provocateur in chief or whatever you decided to call them, but they have permission built in to the meeting to be that and not to go along, because your job is to not go along.
So you're like the devil's advocate.
Yeah, I mean, that's another word people use is devil's advocate. Like, you can use whatever you like. And again, I tried to be very neutral, because this can apply everywhere. It applies in Japan, it applies in India, it applies here in the States. It doesn't really matter. And so when I use language like devil's advocate, people sometimes get a little bit stuck in wherever they are. So I try to choose language that is a little more neutral, but whatever works. I mean, if the organization is fine with it, it's fine with me. But the idea is that I'm not giving you, the organization, leadership, the process is making you be that person, gives you permission to be that person, gives you permission to be divergent. No matter what color your skin is or what gender you are or who you love, right? Bring all of that to work. I don't need to know your backstory to know that you've just presented an idea that's amazing. Back to my DEI officer who's like sitting in their purchasing department going, I can't buy anything from Target.
Yeah.
Like, that's where this stuff comes from.
Yep.
She wasn't some big muckety muck making decisions to do whatever. She was just a lowly buyer at Target saying, I can't buy stuff at my employer that matches my skin tone.
Yeah. One type of person in,
right. And so luckily for her, somebody listened. But how many people don't? So you've got all these brands that have gone up, like, everybody's not Victoria's Secret.
Even Victoria's Secret has started changing. It took,
I know.
I mean, they were almost going out of business.
Right. So. Well, at no time like the present when you're going to go out of business.
Yeah.
I'm encouraging people to do it before then, right? I don't need a crisis to do this.
Yeah.
A lot of people are in crisis when they come to me, but you don't have to be in crisis. Ideally, you're not.
Yeah, you're planning for the future. Yeah.
You're building innovation into the organization. And this is not Six Sigma, right? I am not talking about getting the last quarter penny out of the manufacturing process. That may take breakthrough thinking too, but this is what I call orthogonal or, outside in thinking, or there's any number of things. But I'm trying to set the operating conditions for organizations and leaders to be able to unlock that talent, unlock that opportunity. So,
and to me, part of that is starts from like as you had going a little bit back to something you were talking about before, like when you're applying to jobs where the candidate should also be interviewing the organization to see if it's a good fit for them value wise. But there's so many employers in different industries, higher education included, that don't recognize or have a difficulty in recognizing transferable skills from one industry to the next, from nonprofit to for-profit, from for-profit to nonprofit, from accounting to whatever it may be, and it's there's just still that stigma and stereotyping. You can't do it. You don't know.
It's a bias.
It is a bias. It is a bias.
And the bias is, we want somebody who's been there, done that, and already knows how to do it. I don't want to pay for training, is the way they look at it. So says the chief human resource officer.
But everybody gets trained anyway.
No, I agree. And I think there's a movement out there, as we've moved towards removal of some of the educational requirements, or in the state of Minnesota, they got rid of the ability to ask people about their former drug behavior. It's like, what difference does that make?
Yeah. It's like, that's the past, not the future.
Yeah. And so those are the things in which I think there are glimmers of new ways of approaching these problems. And I think what's going to drive it, I was listening to another group of folks, it's called One Digital, is the name of the organization. And they're PEO, benefits administrations for people, but they're really talking about culture. And McKinsey did a big study, and the problem is we just don't have enough talent to solve the problems that we have. Now, we don't know what AI is going to do exactly, but for the last 30 years, plus or minus, there have been not enough babies born, not enough people immigrating to the country in order to solve these problems. And so what you're seeing, while we say glimmers of hope, what they really are is recognizing kind of too late that, there's a bunch of critical positions that are unfilled because you've got stupid criteria.
Yep.
Quite frankly.
Yep. So it's also the sponsorship stuff as well. Like everything's like capped, where there's a lot of immigrants coming to our country to get educated, and they have to go back home.
The whole system is designed right now to restrict, sort of others, but labor, right? And so now I think what businesses are trying to do, but it's a market response, is that business degree I don't care about. Maybe I don't care about the undergrad degree either.
Yeah.
Okay, can you do the job? And we have to come up with other ways of being able to assess whether you can do the job. But we're not going to make that leap overnight. And I think that people like us need to keep holding out like the question of why, which is what I always ask. Why do we need to do it that way? Well, because well, I don't care. Why now that we've gotten rid of that one, why else do we need to do it?
Yeah.
Well, their colleagues wouldn't think that they were smart enough to do it. Okay. So what do we need to do then? We need to educate people. Okay. And we need to have a process that demonstrates they do have the skills that are necessary, or they do have the innate abilities. So how would we go about doing that? Well, there would be some assessments. Okay. Or we could look at the accomplishments they had. Yes. Okay. So again, you're trying to break it down, but in the breaking it down, you're overcoming the always way of thinking. So we've always had these job descriptions. They've always had these requirements that you always have to have, a college degree, blah, 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 and a such and such a GPA and whatever. Like, how's that working for you? You finding all the talent you need?
Yeah. How's your diversity?
No, maybe it's not working so great. So and that would be, again, that provocateur in chief question, like, how's that working for you? Like, I'm yelling at the kids, and I'm telling them to pick up, and they don't pick up, and I'm mad, and they're crying, and they're mad. Like, how's that working for you? Not so great. So what are you going to do? More of that? Well, that's like stupid, right? So you got to come up with something else. I mean, my kids right now are at that stage as teenagers. Nobody wants to get along. So, and I'm like, I deserve not to be in a household filled with chaos. That's just,
everybody does.
Yeah, well, again, I don't want to speak about you. Maybe you thrive on chaos.
No.
I personally do not. So I just own that with my two. And I said, this is not going to work. So we've got to come up with a solution. And they couldn't. We've been doing, therapy and all the other stuff. Still nothing. So I said, here's the deal. Nobody can be in the common space at the same time except me and the other person, because I don't have these fights. So let's get a calendar. Let's put the hours on the calendar, and you tell me when you're coming down. And you guys can work that out. And we've been doing it for 10 days. And my daughter said, I'm much calmer.
Oh, that's good.
I said, yeah, me too. So we had to try something different. And again, what you try different doesn't work every time. It's like, my other one is I have a little sign that just I love my daughter to ADHD, like when she was little, she'd take her clothes off and, change.
Trail.
Yeah, there's a trail everywhere. And I mean, pick up your stuff, like there's nothing out. And I could see it like everywhere. And it's like, Mimi, please pick up your stuff. It's like, it's picked up. I'm like, okay, let me walk you over to it and I'll show it to you. So then we're like, oh, there it is. I'm like, okay. So I got, humor. I like to use humor a lot. So I got a sign that says, please be considerate of others and pick up your stuff. I put it right on the kitchen table in a little mat that's, nice. Alternate color. And that didn't work. I came down the other day and I'm like, there's a cereal bowl, spoon, computer, deck of cards, all, spread out on the kitchen table, and my daughter's not to be seen.
That's funny.
So I walk upstairs and I'm like, and she's like, what? I'm like, can you come downstairs? She's like, I forgot to clean up, didn't I? I was like, yep. And I'm like, I don't know what else to do right now. I'm not mad. I just don't want to be the maid. And you're too old for me to pick up after you. And this isn't going to work when you've got roommates or you're, living on your own. So my job is not to do the work for you. My job is to figure out how to help you get it done. And if this sign doesn't help, tell me what else we can come up with. So it's that kind of always coming back to the challenge to say, is it working for you? If it's working for you, it's great. Like, my daughter needs to take medication. If she doesn't take medication, she has stomach problems. Oh. So she went off to go see her cousin. And she's like, my stomach hurts. She texted me. She's like, okay. I said, did you take your medicine? No. I'm like, okay, there's a cause and effect. You take your medication, your stomach doesn't hurt. So how about you take your medication? It's like, okay. But I'm trying to get educate people, and I would use my stories with my kids all the time at work, because really human beings aren't any more complicated as adults than we were as
No,
kids.
we're just bigger kids.
Well, the mechanisms all work the same. You know what I mean? That's the thing. It really is fascinating, but I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm giving you what you were looking for, but
no, this is great. I mean, I just love having conversations with people about any DEI topic, and neurodivergence is a very important topic, and just all the little sects that we talked about as well, the subtopics. Have just been so important. So I really enjoy this conversation, and especially also because you brought your kids into the conversation, and it makes it more relatable to folks and to listeners, because everybody has someone they know or a child that they have that is similar. And you just want to pull your hair out, and you're like, oh, but to some of the tactics that you're giving, though, especially when as the children get a little older, to include them in the solution instead of just telling them, because this is the same with teachers too, like the education system, include the kids in making the rules and the consequences, and you'll find that they're harder on themselves than you would have been.
Right. Yeah, no, one of the phrases that I've gotten to, and my kids have actually now repeated it back to me, so I know it's working. I was like, they're what I call my chaos monkeys. And you can watch. I have these, as you talked about, the two schnauzers. Randomly they'll just break into wrestling around with each other and barking at themselves and whatever. And I'm like, what? I don't know. It's just chaos breaks out. And I think, I would use those stories, and I do use those stories at work. So I don't know how many of us know chaos monkeys at work, but I can name a few in my 20 years in corporate America, more than that.
I've had a few, and none of my current government have a few.
This person, everywhere they go,
they
pretty
love
much
chaos.
Just creates a wake of chaos. So we have to figure out what's that up? What's that about? What are they trying to accomplish? Is that useful? It must be for them in some way, shape, or form. But I work with leadership teams a lot to try to help them understand their dynamics, and that that playful, not take ourselves too seriously, idea is something I think that helps keep people open. So, I think that some of my key values are being curious, really, wonder why it is that way.
Yeah.
Yep. And then kind. The first thing I was teaching my children when they're small is choose kind. Choose kind. And if you can't choose kind, then just walk away.
Yeah.
Right. Until you can. And then the second piece is if you're going to say something, is first of all, think, is it kind? Right. And if it's not kind, don't say it. Mm-hmm. And then the second piece is, if it is kind, will the other person actually get something out of it, or is it for you? And if it's just for you, keep it to yourself.
Yeah.
Because again, my son right now, is one of the things he's still learning. He wants to share with his sister all the crap he knows. And I'm like, she didn't care. She didn't care. And you just look like a jerk. So, these are things that I apply at my work environment, and they make a difference, in terms of cultural stuff. They really do. Because back to the things that we talked about, I want everybody to feel safe. Mm-hmm. So if you got a chaos monkey, it doesn't feel safe. Yeah. And then after safety, then you want to belong. And so when I talked about those ways in which we can run a meeting, mm-hmm. I get to be part of the team. I belong.
I'm heard.
And then after you belong, then can I connect? and then can I contribute? Because the pinnacle of all of those is the ability to contribute in a way that's meaningful. And if I have chaos monkeys running around, nope, I'll be damned, even if I get to be the contrarian, if I'm ever going to say anything, because I'm not safe.
Yeah. Yeah. Right? And you can't be your whole self if you're not safe, and you don't want to be, because you're afraid of what might happen.
They actually don't care.
Yeah.
Right. So there are some fundamental things you have to have in place. I don't want to be like, one of my big irritants in my life is the consultants who came in and gave me a formula that didn't work. Like, here, do these things. I'm like, yeah, but you're missing stuff.
Yeah, because they probably didn't do the assessment.
Right. You got to, but part of my assessments are going to be safety. Right. And then I'm in the middle of a project right now, and it's like, they want me to do, an M&A playbook. I'm like, that's fine. Who are the stakeholders? What do you mean?
Oh, man.
If I don't know who the book is for,
the audience,
who I'm trying to influence, I can't do a good job. I can give you a book. You could probably go find one on the internet.
Barnes & Noble, here you
go. But, you got to start with who are the stakeholders, what do they care about?
Yeah.
And that would be that kind of assessment. So again, when you come in to these situations, or you're going to do these things for yourself. So let's make this really practical for your listeners. And then they're really sort of two. And my Pomodoro thing's going to go off again. I'm just going to let it go. So I'm supposed to stand up right now. And whatever. So
you can stand up if you want to.
I'm not going to stand up. Okay. You don't need to see my. Yeah. Anyway, but below my chest, we're good. Now I got myself off track here. There we go. ADHD squirrel. It's super important that we know who we're speaking to and for what purpose, right?
Exactly.
So I think you went back to the why. So again, the two audience members are, I think about this conversation as being for business leaders. And I want it to be for the folks who are diverse. So it's both. And in the divergent piece, or the diverse folks, it's like, ask yourself the question, do I feel safe? Then ask yourself, if I feel safe, do I feel like I belong? If I don't feel like I belong, or I don't feel safe, then I've got some fundamental work to do, or I need to leave that organization. Because you can't change it if you're an individual contributor. That's not going to change. The chaos monkey is going to be the chaos monkey. The sooner you figure out that that's what's going on, leave. Because you will never be able to achieve anything other than earn a paycheck and be miserable.
Yeah.
But if you can get those two, then what you get to is, can I now start to connect? And if the answer is no, then you can talk to leadership about, I feel okay. I feel safe. I feel like I belong to the group, but I don't feel like I can connect to be able to make a difference. And then after that, can I contribute? Because if you can't contribute, you should look for a place that you can.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what I want to leave our audience with, who are individual contributors.
Awesome.
Manage your career. Look at things honestly. Tell yourself the truth, and then take action according to what you see. Trust yourself. Okay. One of the things that I've come up recently is, behind every blind spot is a bright spot. So if the blind spot, you haven't been getting ahead, go ask those questions that we just talked about, those four. And if behind it, the bright spot is you've got a chaos monkey, get your resume ready, go look for something else, because you're just not going to change it. Now, on the leadership side, I've got a different challenge for them. On the leadership side, you really want to get stuff done, then you need to unlock the talent that you've got. Stop complaining that you have people who are, incapable, terrible, you're not meeting deadlines, whatever the complaints are that they've got, and be like, why? And if the answer is, do they feel safe? Which leaders do you have that don't lead you to having people who feel safe? Do people feel like they belong? Can people connect? Do these leaders let them contribute? And if the answers to those questions are no, then coach them or get them out of your business because they're killing you.
Yep.
Okay. And if you're looking to try to create programs that you can actually make a difference and make it so that it's scalable, then put in place an operating system for
What do you mean?
meetings, a meeting operating system.
Oh,
so
okay.
We're going to have an agenda. People are going to be assigned roles, and we're going to let those things rotate. And it's not an option, because if you don't do that, you'll never unlock the talent that exists in your organization.
And people will not realize every company has individual employees who don't know what their talents are yet, and changing the roles will expose them to different opportunities and allow them to possibly realize, like, hey, I'm good at this. I never thought of doing this before. So yeah.
And that's why it's called an operating system, because operating systems can be evaluated, operating systems can be improved, operating systems can be evaluated, operating systems can be improved. If we let it go and it's simply an ad hoc thing, it's chaos.
Yeah.
It's just chaos. So again, those are my messages to our two audience, members, is to try to figure out how to turn this into something that translates into something that's useful. So manage your career, manage it. Nobody else is going to manage it. You've got to manage it. I don't care what color you are. I don't care who you love. I don't care any of that stuff. Doesn't matter. Manage your own career.
And be honest with yourself.
Yeah, and be honest. Be honest with, the assessment. I mean, we all make excuses. Oh, he was having a bad day. Yeah, for the last 6 months, at every meeting. Okay, maybe that's really generous. After a while, who's that harming you, right?
Exactly.
So do be honest with yourself, and then again, on the other side, for leadership, depending on where you're at in terms of C-suite or mid layer, you can implement the mid layer stuff right now, and you'll see people show up in ways they've never done it. And as a C-suite, getting an operating system in place that everybody needs to run meetings in a particular way helps you figure out which leaders need to go, which ones need to be improved, and which ones are rock stars. Because you can't do it by yourself. No,
you can't. Nobody can.
No.
So, thank you so much, Khris. I really enjoyed this conversation. So I know we're a little over time, but I want to talk about some key takeaways very quickly. So you talked about Divergence as a catalyst for innovation, and how diverse perspectives and experiences can lead to groundbreaking solutions and that drive organizational growth. Touched a little bit about design system thinking and the importance of tracking inputs, outputs, and stakeholder interests to achieve remarkable outcomes. Like, again, know who your audience is, and creating safe and inclusive spaces, and their significance of fostering an environment where every team member feels safe, belongs, feels connected, and is empowered to contribute. We talked about influencing C-suite dynamics to where we gained insights into aligning power structures to embrace divergence and delivering breakthrough thinking. And you talked a little bit about personal and professional integration, about how your personal experiences as an active member of the LGBTQIA community and a parent of 2 neurodivergent teens inform your personal approach to leadership, which storytelling is very powerful. So I can only imagine how much it does influence your approach to leadership. Some next steps for listeners: implement design thinking. Start encouraging and valuing diverse perspectives within your teams to drive innovation and growth. Adopt design thinking. Track stakeholder interests, inputs, and outputs to enhance decision-making and achieve better outcomes. Create inclusive spaces. Foster a safe and inclusive environment where every team member feels valued and empowered to contribute. Influence leadership dynamics. Work towards aligning C-suite dynamics to embrace and leverage divergent thinking in your organization. And continuous learning. Engage with DEI resources and communities to continually improve your understanding and implementation of inclusive practices. Do you have any other next steps for listeners or key takeaways for our listeners, Khris?
One of the things I like to say is that when we all do better, we all do better. And what I mean by that is the opportunity to make it better for particular populations is inclusion by design, right? So I want people to think about the next time they see a curb cut that were designed for people with wheelchairs, whether they use them or not, for their kids in their strollers or when they're pulling their bicycles or their bags. And that's what inclusion by design is. So when you have an opportunity to influence the inclusion, speak up, say something, be an advocate. And I think that's really the place that I'm trying to get all of my folks that are aligned in this movement to get to, because it's everybody, right? It's not, it isn't me against you. It's not my opportunity or my success and your loss. It's we all do better.
That's right. That's right. It's like the one twig, it snaps, but you can't snap a bunch of twigs together. So, well, it's harder. I should say more difficult. So if any of my listeners want to get a hold of you, whether it's to have you come on their podcast or a speaking engagement or to learn more about your consulting business, what's the best way for them to reach you?
On LinkedIn.
Or what are the ways they can reach you? I apologize.
Yeah, sure. On LinkedIn, you can do that most easily because it has all my contact information, and it's How Champion is on LinkedIn. So you just type in How Champion, or you can use my name and it shows up as well. It's easier sometimes to remember How Champion than Khris.
Okay. And do you have a website or anything?
That's also yeah. So www.Purpocity, Purpocity Consulting.com. And it's the word purpose and velocity put together. So purposeful velocity, moving forward with purpose.
I love that.
So, but again, if you go to LinkedIn, you'll see my link to my website and all the other stuff, phone numbers, book an appointment.
Perfect. Yeah. Again, I will have Kristopher's LinkedIn information linked to it, as well as purpocityconsulting.com and his other information for that you can be found on LinkedIn on the last slide of today's podcast, and as well as in the summary of our podcast episode today, so you don't have to go thumbing through if you just want to glance at the summary. You can grab that information there. So you're very, very welcome. So that's all we have today, listeners. Thank you so much for listening. This episode we dropped Thursday, June 27th, which you're already listening to. But remember, all of our episodes are dropped every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you for listening. And remember, stay diversifused. Be a guest speaker on the Get Diversifused podcast, I'm on the lookout for guests. So if you're passionate about DEI and would like to share your unique insights, experiences, or success stories, I want to hear from you. If you're a fellow podcaster who's passionate about DEI, let's swap the mic and amplify each other's voices. If you're interested in being a guest, reach out to me at Andrea@Diversifused.com and I'll send you the link to our best interest form. Hope to hear from you soon. Remember, stay diversifused. Now go out there and make a difference. And as always, for more strategies on building inclusive workplaces and communities, check out Diversifused. We're here to guide you on your DEI journey. Make sure to visit our website at Diversifused.com and follow us on social media for the latest happenings, blog posts, tips, and events.